Welcome to Pause and Reflect, the podcast where compassion meets action, and where we dive deep into the stories of those who advocate for the voiceless, nurture our planet, and foster a more compassionate world. I'm your host, Alexander Taylor Clayton, here to explore the intersections of animal welfare, environmental sustainability, and the innovative solutions shaping our future. So sit back, stay curious, and join us as we reflect on the change we wish to see in the world. Let's embark on this journey together. I'm your host, Alexander Taylor Clayton, and today we are privileged to have Dr. Aysha Akhtar join us. Dr. Akhtar is a neurologist, public health specialist, and the author of Our Symphony with Animals, a book that delves deep into how empathy for animals can improve our own health and the health of our planet. Today, she's here to share insights on the emotional lives of animals, the intersection of human and animal health, and much more. Dr. Akhtar, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, as a neurologist, I'm curious, how did you go from neurology into advocating animal rights, or was it the animal rights that informed your path into neurology? I'm curious about your pathway there.
It was a little bit of both, actually. So when I was in high school, that's when I kind of knew I was going to go into medicine in one form or another. I didn't know it would be neurology at the time. And it was at that time that I was also becoming aware of how our treatment of animals, is incredibly destructive in most cases. And I became aware of factory farms and the horrendous abuse of animals in factory farms and animal experimentation. And so, as I proceeded through my coursework in medicine and then through neurology, I also started to realize that as I was studying human health, I was seeing how we treat animals really does impact human health when you think about it. I mean, you think about factory farms, it increases our risk for infectious diseases. We've got bird flus and swine flus migrating and transmitting around factory farms all over the world. We think about the wildlife trade and the live markets. That's a big risk for new infectious diseases. We think about factory farms and its impact on climate, our environment, which of course impacts human health. And I also became more and more aware about animal testing, and not only how is it just horribly destructive to these poor animals, but it's actually not the best way to study human health and to study human diseases and find the treatment. So the two, animal advocacy and human health and advocacy, really merge very organically and naturally for me.
Oh, that's very fascinating. I mean, and it makes sense too, because like you said, these factory farms, they are a horrible pit of disease, and not even to mention the just outrageous, completely unethical treatment of these animals. But a lot of that stems from just a sheer lack of value and their intrinsic value of life. These animals are more seen of objects than of like people or individuals trying to just live a good life. What would you say was a focusing on your career? What would you say was a pivotal moment for you? Something that really stands out as that kind of like launched you in this direction?
Well, I'll say one thing was I was at a neuroscience conference during my neurology residencies, and it was there that I was watching one experimenter describe an experiment. And so there was several hundred neurologists, neuroscientists in the audience at the time. And this man was showing a videotape of an experiment in which he basically had crushed the spinal cord of a cat, implanted electrodes into her brain, and what he did, he paralyzed her back legs. And he had,
Wow.
in the videotape, he was showing the poor cat trying to walk on this cat-sized treadmill that he was trying to record her movements. And of course, because her back legs were paralyzed, she kept falling off the treadmill. So he'd keep putting her back on and she'd keep falling off. And one thing in particular struck me. At one point, when he was trying to readjust her on this treadmill, she actually rubbed her head against his hand. And if you know cat behavior, that's a sign of seeking affection. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that was just so poignant and so heartbreaking that this poor cat who was suffering tremendously was trying to seek comfort from the very hand that caused her suffering. And it, I watched this. The experimenter never talked about this, about the glaring ethical, issue that this video was showing. No one in the audience seemed to notice or to care. And of course, at the end of the experiment, the experimenter killed his cat and dissected her brain. And it just showed to me the lack. I guess I just don't understand that, because the whole reason for going into medicine is because we're supposed to care about protecting life, and not to make a distinction that one life is not worthy of protection just because if it's not of our in our group, whatever that group would be, right? It used to be women were less worthy of certain types of healthcare treatment. It's still an issue. Black people, same thing, right? Native Americans, same thing. It's still an issue, and we extend that towards other species as well. And so it just I found myself asking, is there not a better way to be helping human health, decreasing our suffering without causing the suffering to another? And that really led me into a deep dive into animal testing as an issue. And as the more I read about animal testing and the more I read the peer-reviewed articles, the more it became very obvious to me that whatever role animal testing may have had in the past, what we now know today is not the best way to study human health and find the treatments for our diseases. It's actually preventing us in finding the best treatments, because we're now at these looking at subtle nuances in physiology and genetic makeup and expression, and little differences between species makes a big difference in the results of a study. So we're well beyond that level in which we could apply results from other animals to humans. We really need to just focus on human biology. And that ultimately led to my starting the nonprofit organization, the Center for Contemporary Sciences, which was really meant to help drive a move away from animal testing and to help create an industry that's focused on methods that are really focused on human biology.
I gotta say, I was sitting here, and as you were talking about, I had the image of the cat so clearly in my head, just trying to get up and then rubbing their head against his hand. I can see it so very easily, and my heart was breaking when you were telling me that. There's a
My my
that's
heart
painful to
breaks.
hear. It's painful to
It
hear.
is. It still torments me today. I've witnessed many animal experiments, and this one in particular really tormented me today. And especially, I have cats and I love my cats, and I just cannot imagine what life is like for not only the cats, but all the other animals who are living miserable lives in these laboratories. It breaks my heart, and it it just, again, it's just like what I've said so often about the intersection between animal health and well-being and human health and well-being, which is basically what's good for animals is good for humans. When we treat animals with kindness, respect, we respect their individuality, we respect their rights, we actually benefit. Our health actually improves. We lower our risk of infectious diseases. We lower our risk of climate change and environmental destruction. And we can improve medical research by getting away from that horrible legacy of experimenting on other animals.
Well, it's very brutalist, and it's completely irreverent to the intrinsic value of life that these. Let me start again. My background is in anthropology specifically, and there's a big hot button term that listeners are going to be hearing a lot throughout the season, and that's anthropocentrism, the viewpoint that human beings are on top, and then everything else within the global ecology and environmental systems serves our purpose, and it is a complete fabrication of the mind. It is incredibly not true. And so many people forget that we are a part of nature. We are not separate from this. We are not separate from the animal kingdom. We are part of it. We are the same. These are our neighbors in this beautiful garden of a planet that we have. And the way we treat other species really is a self-reflection of ourselves, if we allow ourselves to really think about it and how we treat, because it's abhorrent. It is utterly abhorrent. All these testing, cosmetics, food testing, all kinds of that go in on these poor creatures who have no defense. They can't. They have no right, no say in anything. No one's at. Well, there are people advocating for them, but it's abhorrent. It's horrible. It's terrifying when you really think about it on a very deep spiritual level or philosophical level. Like, what are we doing? How can we treat all these lives like this and think that that's okay? If I may, I said this on a previous episode before, but sometimes I imagine that other animals on this planet probably look at humans something akin to demons sometime, the way we are. And this is, if we're going to have a good future on this planet, this has to change immediately. This had to change 50 years ago. This had to change 100 years ago. This had to change a very long time ago. And I'm hopeful. I'm very optimistic about where we're going, the direction that everything's going. What do you think on our future, where we're going with our relationship to these animals and our health, and how we are applying all of these methodologies? What do you think?
I go through ups and downs. There are definitely periods when I'm just so overwhelmed with the horror of what we are inflicting on other species. I mean, it's at a number and a degree that is unparalleled, right? The amount of suffering we cause to other beings is unparalleled to anything else we've ever done, to even to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part of it is that it's not even recognized. Most of it is even recognized by our species as a problem, right? And it just gets back to that the anthropocentric view that we are on top of this world and we can decide what we want to do with other beings. Well, that's very self-fulfilling, right? I mean, that's us deciding that we are the best, right? I mean,
Right,
it's
exactly.
kind of silly. And so there are times when I truly do feel overwhelmed with it, and I feel like, oh God, this is so hard. How are we going to change people's views? And then there are other times when this might sound kind of negative, when I think, well, we're going to have to change because nature is going to make us change in one way or another. Climate, we're going to have to reckon with our destruction of the environment, our destruction of our climate at some point. Even if people don't fully recognize it now and aren't willing to change their behaviors and want to blame everyone else and always waiting for industry or government to do the change and not make changes within themselves, we're going to have to reckon with ourselves at some point with that.
Oh, that
We're
reckoning
also,
is coming. That
it is.
absolutely. We can push it off as much as we want. We can say, "Oh, that's tomorrow's problem," but the clock is ticking
It
every
is.
day.
Yes, it is. And same with, when you think about emerging infectious diseases. So COVID-19, I'd hoped would be a wake-up call for people. I mean, that was an infectious disease that stemmed from our abuse of animals. Whether you think it came from the laboratory where animals were experimented on, or whether it came from the live markets, which is part of a wildlife trade, which the United States is one of the biggest culprits
Mm,
in the wildlife trade. In one way or another, it stemmed from our abuse of other animals. So, it we're going to see more. We're having bird flu now in the United States. And it's just, I mean, we've always had bird flu and we've had big flare ups of bird flu in the United States. Now we're seeing people infected with bird flu in the United States. One day it's going to get really bad and it's going to be
mm-hmm.
far worse than COVID-19. So we're going to have to wake up at one point. At some point, we're going to have to change. And then there's a third part of me that meets lovely people like you and other people who actually do give a damn, who actually do question our relationship with other animals and say, there's got to be a better way, and can say, we don't have to be this way as a species. We can be a better species. We can be kinder. We can be humane in the way it's supposed to be, right? So, and that gives me hope as well. So I think most of the time I feel the hope that we things will change. And that's what keeps me driving.
Well, I was talking about this in a previous interview with Dr. Mark Bekoff, who I had on the podcast. And he talked about the animal testing, and he pointed out something that is very true that I hadn't considered, but when you hear it, makes complete sense. That we do need to start testing more on humans for all these human problems, but also with the animal testing. There's a basic scientific principle here of an animal or person in distress and those results messing with the end result that you will get of your test, because it's not clear research, because these are creatures under significant stress. I don't know any other way to word it, and that's going to muddy any results you get because they're not clear.
Is absolutely right. And I just also want to just clarify a few things. First of all, humans are being tested on. That's what clinical trials are. So
Right,
if
yes,
you're
of course.
enrolled in a clinical trial, you are the first person to receive, or one of the first people to receive a new drug or a new vaccine. So
That's right.
you are part of an experiment, and you are enrolled in an experiment that is giving you a false sense of security based on animal tests. And what I mean by that is that
Mm.
the way the process is now is that if a drug or vaccine is found safe and effective in animal tests, then it moves on to human clinical trials. But the problem is that 90 to 95% of the time, the human clinical trials fail, and most of them fail because what was found safe and effective in animals ends up being unsafe or ineffective in humans. So there's no predictability that we can really get from animal testing. So people are taking their lives into risk when they enroll in clinical trials based on animal test results. They think the animal tests are going to protect them. But the evidence is showing no, animal tests are not predicting whether something is going to be safe and whether it will work in them. The other thing I want to mention is that what I'm suggesting is not call for more human testing, more than what we already do as far as clinical trials. What I'm calling for
Mm.
is for more methods that use human biology. So these are methods that are not enrolling humans, but they are methods using human tissues, three-dimensional structures, organs in the lab that you can grow, organs on a chip, things like that, that
Stem
actually
cells or
represent
such.
human biology. Exactly, represent human biology, can give us a whole picture, a whole perspective of what happens in the whole human body. These are the type of methods I'm saying that should replace animal testing and will actually better protect people who enroll in clinical trials and better tell us with more accuracy and predictiveness whether a drug or vaccine will actually work and be safe in people.
Right, and that just makes sense from a genetic standpoint, because while we do share fundamental DNA with the rest of our planet, there are very important markers that are in the DNA that's going to be very different and going to create very different outcomes between the animal and the human. That just makes sense.
It makes absolutely sense. I mean, that's why a dog looks like a dog. Monkey looks like a monkey. A human looks like a human. That's why you look like you do. There's differences between you and I. What may be safe and effective in you may not be safe and effective in me. So if we already know there's so many differences within our own species, when your biology may not necessarily predict my biology, how can we expect the biology of a monkey or a dog or a cat to predict our biology? It doesn't make sense. It's really time to move on. And this goes back to that underlying theme that I really try to stress is really protecting animals, not treating them as inanimate objects, respecting their rights as individuals is actually beneficial for us as well.
I agree. I absolutely agree. But let's talk about your book, Our Symphony with Animals. For any listeners who may not be familiar about it, would please give us a little bit of a brief about what all you cover in the book, and maybe some
Sure.
key messages.
Yeah, so basically the key message is pretty much what we've been talking about is how
Right.
our health and well-being is very much tied with the well-being of other animals. And so I explore that throughout the book, and it's in part through my own past history, as well as I take the reader on a journey as I travel around the country and meet different individuals who benefited from a better relationship with other animals, or who actually are not benefiting because they're actually hurting animals. So, I show how abuse of animals negatively impacts our well-being. That's a smaller section, but most of it's about how people have actually found health, found peace, found well-being through positive relationships with animals. And some of it's are like stories like people with HIV who were stigmatized and they found companionship with other animals to really boost their health and well-being because facing the stigma that they did from other humans, or people at state mental hospitals and when animals were introduced and how their lives significantly changed and how they benefited and how so many of them actually got better much faster because of these wonderful relationships with animals. So it's a journey through so many different types of ways we relate to other animals and how that affects us.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, there's so many studies that have shown that when we are closer with nature and other animals, that our brain chemistry changes and we are naturally uplifted. I mean, it makes sense to me that that would be the case. Before we dive deeper into today's topic, I want to take a moment to talk about the heart behind our podcast, ROLDA, the Romanian League in Defense of Animals. ROLDA is more than just an organization. It's a beacon of hope for thousands of animals in need. With a dual mission of rescuing distressed animals in Romania and preventing animal suffering through effective spay and neuter campaigns, ROLDA has transformed the lives of animals and communities alike. Our efforts extend beyond rescue and rehabilitation. We're committed to creating sustainable solutions that address the root causes of animal homelessness and neglect. From building modern sanctuaries to provide a safe haven for animals, to education and outreach programs that foster a culture of care and respect, ROLDA is on the front lines, making a tangible difference every single day. But this journey isn't one we walk alone. It's the support from people like you, our listeners, who share our passion for animal welfare that empowers ROLDA to continue our vital work, whether it's by volunteering, spreading the word, or making a donation. Every action counts towards creating a better world for animals. To learn more about how you can be a part of this transformative mission, visit rolda.org. If you would like to donate to ROLDA and help save a life today, visit rolda.org/donate. Together, we can make a difference, one animal at a time. Now, let's get back to our story. Now, how do you feel media representations of animals influences public attitudes towards animal rights and welfare? And maybe what could be done to improve these perceptions, do you think?
Yeah. The media absolutely influences how people think about animals. And, the media is made up of people who are part of the system that abuses animals. And what I mean by that is that they're the folks who buy leather. They're the folks who eat animals that come from factory farms, right? So they're the folks that, think that the only way to improve our health is by more and more experiments on animals. And so they perpetuate these ideas. And so people come to think that, we hurting other animals, they don't even call it hurting, but this is just a natural part of being human beings, a natural part of life. It's our right to do these things to other animals. And it benefits us to hurt other animals in these ways.
Which
and
we
the
both
media
know it's not.
that. Exactly. And the media perpetuates that. The media is terrible. The general media is terrible when it comes to these issues in regards to animals and animal rights. It marginalizes the issue. It makes it look like it is not one worthy of consideration. And it still has so many articles that reinforce violence toward other animals, even if not directly, but indirectly. They reinforce violence. They reinforce these attitudes that violence towards other animals is okay in the pursuit of human good, whatever that good may be, even if it's for, a trim on our coat,
If it serves a human purpose, it's therefore okay to do.
Yeah, exactly. And
which is a travesty. It's an ethical pitfall.
It absolutely is. And our media is doing a terrible job. They did a terrible job with COVID-19. They didn't really talk about how how this infectious disease emerged and really show that it is a direct cause from our poor relationship with other animals. And the media didn't do that. The media dropped the ball. The media was neglectful. So same with our public health agencies. They didn't say, look, this is a problem. We need to rethink how we relate to other animals. we're going to have a worse COVID-19. We're going to have a bird flu that's going to be far worse coming up. The COVID-19 was nothing compared to the kind of pandemic we are likely going to happen and likely will stem from a factory farm or another one from the wildlife trade. But because our public health agencies, our media, I'd say were neglectful. They were criminally neglectful in not educating the public about this connection between these emerging infectious diseases and our treatment of other animals. So, what I tell people all the time is it's so important. Please, please, please write letters to the editor. Please write to the media. Please let them know that this is not, this is not something that you accept. When you see an article, like when you see an article on bird flu, for example, and it doesn't talk about the stem cause of bird flu, which really it comes from factory farms. It is mutating because of factory farms. When you see an article that does not address that at all, you have to call attention to the editors, call attention to the authors. Please write to them. It doesn't have to be a long letter. Just say, hey, I'm incredibly disappointed, and this is neglectful on your part not to be talking about how these infectious diseases are emerging and why, and really educating the public about how factory farms play a significant, if not one of the most significant roles in emerging infectious diseases, for example. There's also, so many articles now, there's the where you can publicly comment online on so many articles. And I think it's really important for people to do that. It doesn't have to be long, just a quick reminder. Save your comments. You can post the same comment again and again and again. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Save it and copy and paste it again and again. I mean, if it's about animal testing, have one comment about animal testing that you use again and again. If it's about bird flu or emerging infectious diseases, do the same thing and have one comment that you post again and again and again. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the writers will read the comments, even if the editors don't. The writers read what the comments are saying about their article.
And hopefully the writer will say something to the editor.
Hopefully, or at least it'll make them think that maybe next time they need to really address the issues that
make this a point, an addressing point. Yes, in the article.
Yeah.
And that's true, listeners. For who's here with us today, every voice counts. A large part of why everything is the way it is because good people don't stand up and say something. It's easier to be quiet and hope somebody else will take care of the issue, but then that's when you get the loud, angry, tunnel-visioned individuals who think they have the right idea. They're all loud and saying their opinion. We need more people who understand that this is a fundamentally flawed system that doing incredibly unethical things to billions of species all around our planet. And it has to stop. It has to stop if we're going to evolve in the direction that we need to be. If we're going to solve so many problems we have. This is a multivariate problem. How we treat life on this planet that is not our own, including ourselves. So, listener, please listen to that. Listen to that and do that. It is so important. Stand up, voice your opinion, make comments. I love the idea of a template. That's a brilliant idea. Make a little Google Doc, have a little template of just like different things. That's great. I love that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Thank you. And I'm going to stress again, please, everyone, please don't wait for others to do it. Everyone's waiting for others to do it. Everyone thinks that the big animal protection organizations will take care of it all. They can't. We can't. The ones who are fighting can't. We have our own limited time. We can't do it all. We need everyone. Please, everyone, stand up and add your voice to this, please. And we can make this change, but we need everyone, at least the people who care enough, to stand up and be part of this movement.
That's right. It's a psychological theory of it's the window effect. I forget what the exact name of it is, but there's an incident going on outside in the street and everybody can hear it and they look out the windows, but everybody thinks somebody else will call and then nobody calls and then nothing happens. You have to be the one to stand up. Don't assume somebody else will do it for you. You got to have the courage and you can do it. You can do it, listener. And I believe in you to do so.
You can do it. And the one thing I would say is one thing I always ask myself is on my deathbed, how do I want to look back on my life? Was I quiet and
I love
passive?
that.
Or did I try? Even if I didn't always succeed, and most of the time I probably won't, but did I
Did you
try?
stand for what you
Can I at
believed
least
in?
did I stand for what I believe? And that's what you have to think about you and your life as well.
Now, as we move forward with scientific advancements, how can we ensure that the ethical treatment of animals remains at the forefront of research and policy discussions?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is, first of all, if anyone thinks that the Animal Welfare Act and there are other protections and blah blah blah, and if they think that that protects animals, I'm going to tell you this right now, it doesn't do. I mean, I could put a curse word here, but it's pretty minimal. They're almost pretend that there are no protections for animals, because
Would you,
that's
would you say it's
almost
lip
reality.
service?
Lip service mostly. So the Animal Welfare Act does not prevent any kind of experiment on an animal, no matter how much that animal may suffer. It doesn't require pain medications. It doesn't require anesthesia. If an animal's being, having a surgical procedure done on him or her, if an experimenter thinks that drowning a rat, drowning animals is important for the purpose of their study, they can drown animals. If they want to starve their dogs, for the purpose of the study, they can starve their dogs. If they want to electrocute their animals, they can electrocute their animals. If they want to paralyze them without pain medication, do do surgeries on them without anesthesia, they can do those things. There is no limit on what can and arguably has been done to animals in the name of research. So get rid of any notion that animals are well protected in laboratories. Get rid of that notion. The other thing I want to say is the only way we're really going to protect animals is by getting them out of these laboratories. And that means by replacing their use with these advanced methods. So this is how I would really suggest, is that we really need to push our governmental health agencies, push industry, push pharmaceutical companies, push the biomedical industry to start discovering, developing, and using more advanced testing methods that are based on human biology, that not only are better for human health, but that will get rid of using animals in experiments altogether.
And to leapfrog off of that, because I think that's fantastic, could you discuss a policy change or maybe advocacy effort that you've been involved with that you feel has made a significant impact in this direction on animal welfare and public health?
Well, I don't think there's any that's made a significant impact yet. So, as far as policy is concerned, so one thing I was involved with was the passage of the FDA Modernization Act 2.0, which was a
Mm,
bill that basically removed, now law, that basically removed the legal mandate that required drugs and vaccines must be tested on animals for the FDA's purposes, Food and Drug Administration's purposes. Now,
which is pivotal.
it was, yes, it hasn't led to any practical change yet. And so what
Hmm,
it did
I
do
see.
is start to change the narrative and the discussion. And so in that case, it was important because it said, hey, we don't have to do animal testing. There are other ways. Let's start using those other ways. So in that sense, it has, I think, been important, very important. Now, as far as practical changing how pharmaceutical companies work and even how the FDA works, hasn't yet, but I think it will over time. There are other types of, smaller statewide policies that I've been involved with. One was a legislation in Maryland that passed that takes fees from animal testing labs to be used for funding these advanced, I call them human relevant testing methods that can replace animal testing. So that was a
Oh,
nice
could you
bill
say
that
that? Could you
was.
say that again for the listener?
Yeah, so it was a bill in Maryland that passed. It's called I think it's the Human Relevant Fund Act. Basically, it
Hmm.
takes the fees that the state of Maryland collects from laboratories that use animals and uses those fees to provide grants for the development of non-animal testing methods, for the development of methods that are based on
Oh,
human
excellent.
biology. Yeah. It's not a huge amount of money, unfortunately. It's still chump change compared to how much money still goes into animal testing, but it's a step in the right direction. And what really is needed is a push of NIH, National Institutes of Health, and other health agencies to stop putting so much of their funding towards animal research and instead start putting their funding towards the development of more advanced methods. And until that changes, until their funding changes, animal research won't end.
That makes sense. When it comes to human beings, I've noticed many systems that tend to enact oppression, just whether purposefully or indirectly. People often need an incentive to go out of their way to do something kind sometimes, which on the one hand, it's terrible. That shouldn't be the case. But at the other hand, I can understand that, that we live in oppressive systems that do make it hard to have moments where you can relax or not worry about, like, I got to get this done, or where's the next dollar coming from, or God, I just want to be able to sit down on my couch and not have to think about what else is going wrong in the world today. And I can understand the coming from those positions, but I feel like the biggest incentive anybody could possibly have, outside of this is what's right to do and what is decent to do, and that we should do these, but you just got to think about our health, like how all of this is impacting everything. And I'm not sure how to end off that thought, but we
I
have a
think
lot of work to do.
we do. And I think you're right. I mean, obviously, dangling, a carrot is better off sometimes than a stick,
Sometimes.
although a stick can definitely be an important part of how we make change as well. And so if you can provide an incentive, and that's what we try to do at the Center for Contemporary Sciences, is we try to show, look, hey, scientists, this is the way to go. This is the future of medicine. Get rid of that old, archaic, horrible way of experimenting and testing on animals, and instead use these amazing cutting edge methodologies, cutting edge technology that actually gives us a better picture of human biology, a better understanding of why we get the diseases we do, and a better chance for finding treatments and cures. So, when you reframe it that way, that also helps. You say, look, this is the future. This is the exciting future. This is the Star Trek of medicine. Let's get there. We can get there.
And we all want that. We all want
Yes,
that.
we all do. Yeah.
Let's talk more about the Center of Contemporary Sciences. It's something you are heavily involved in. I believe you were founder.
Yeah, founder and CEO.
What are some interesting things that are going on? Like you mentioned a little bit, but let's go in a little bit further so people can understand what important work goes on at the Center of Contemporary Sciences.
Yeah, so there are organizations, the Center for Contemporary Sciences. I founded it in 2020. And the main goal of it is to help, I would say, catalyze the replacement of animal testing. So help create a system that improves the discovery, the development, and the use of what I call human relevant methods, that are methods based on human biology, that are better for human health, and that replace animal testing. And we do this by different ways. We do this through policy work, like the FDA Modernization Act, like that Maryland state legislation bill that I mentioned. We have some other policy work that we've been working on. We do it through education and training. So we train many up and coming biomedical scientists who are not learning about these other ways of testing. They're being told that they have to do animal research at their universities, and we're training them, teaching them about these other methods and how they can become these scientists who are going to be really promoting and working on these other methods. So that's a fellowship and an internship program we have. We do scientific publications and other publications. We speak at scientific and other conferences worldwide, op-eds, interviews with the media, like the New York Times and Wired, other things like that. We've
So you
helped.
guys are all over the place doing all
Yeah,
incredible
yeah.
things.
Yeah, a lot of things. We've helped match some companies that are creating these non-animal methods with potential investors, for example. So yeah, we're really trying to drive a very systematic change away from using animals and towards using these other more accurate human relevant testing methods.
Which is only going to help improve our own health and the medicine that we get as well, which is incredibly important. I mean, we want to live in a healthy world, don't we?
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit about One Health, if you don't mind. It's something that you were involved with before. For our listeners who may be a little bit confused or maybe may have wrong ideas about it, would you mind going in a little bit about what exactly One Health is?
Yeah, so One Health is an idea that animal health is connected with human health. And on the surface, it sounds like, yeah, that makes sense. That's like what people might say, well, Aisha, that's what you're saying here. It's not quite the same. And I was never really involved with One Health. But so the problem with the One Health movement is that it really, their idea of animal health is no infectious diseases, for example. But basically, what that means is okay, so we know that animals in factory farms horribly distressed, horribly maltreated, high rates of infectious diseases running rampant through factory
Can
farms.
I take a guess? That
Yeah.
their only concern is that it's not transmitting diseases to humans, but everything else is fine.
Well, most of it's fine. Their solution is let's vaccinate these animals. Vaccinate. Well, guess what? Viruses actually do mutate out. So vaccines
That's just
actually
going to
end up
make
not working.
stronger disease over
Yeah,
time.
and they've shown there have been studies that have shown that vaccination actually further spurs mutation of viruses. So
Right.
you're never gonna vaccination is not a solution.
That
So
feels
the
like a
One Health
band-aid.
exactly. So the One Health doesn't really address the underlying problem, the underlying abuse of these animals, the underlying suffering of these animals. It's about just vaccinating and let's increase surveillance. Well, those things don't really work very well. They're never going to be a solution, and they're certainly never going to prevent these diseases and these problems from emerging in the first place. So that's the problem I have with the One Health is it actually perpetuates the very industries and systems that are causing these problems, and it perpetuates the abuse and suffering of animals. It doesn't challenge the notion of how we treat animals currently in these systems. It does not challenge that. And that is the fundamental problem with the One Health movement as it is today.
I'm glad we went into this. This is a very important information that I think our our listeners are going to really enjoy. Readers. Well, we will have articles on the website, but no, that's important, and thank you so much for that clarity. That's really important to know going forward. So, an important issue with all this is really comes down to educating the public, getting the public aware of all these things, but also really just getting them to understand the implications of everything truly what they mean to enact all these things, like all this animal testing, the lives and the suffering that they're going through, what all this actually truly transpiring. And while many do, many like to look the other way. And so I ask you, what strategies do you find most effective in educating the public and healthcare professionals about the connections between human health and animal welfare?
I think actually the positive messaging is really important. And meaning, like the way I talk about animal testing, I mean, I know I talked about some of the negative parts about it and the suffering of animals, but for the
Hmm.
most part, we actually do say, look, this is an exciting future, in medicine. We can get there. This Star Trek medicine, right, is how you frame it. And I think people don't want to hear about negative and negative and negative. And if you frame it in a positive way, wow, we can have a whole new way of being that's kinder, a whole new relationship with our natural world that's better for us, right? In which the planet is flourishing and healthier. And that means we are more likely to flourish and be healthier. I think framing it in this
And
way
I don't
is
understand
really
why
important.
anybody would not want to live in that world. It sounds
Yeah,
beautiful to me. It sounds
yeah.
happy and significantly more carefree. I don't understand why anybody wouldn't want to live in that world. It's a lovely world.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really it. I think, really just, showing the beautiful world we could have, showing the beautiful relationship we can have with our planet, the beautiful relationship we can have with other animals and with ours and each other. I think that will have a stronger impact than just merely focusing on the suffering and the destruction, as important as that is to bring up, without a doubt. But people do get that fatigue from hearing about that again and again, and they need to hear the positive messaging as well.
I agree with that. A lot of times, too many people will get tired because day after day, everything that's in the news, even if it's not specifically related to this topic, just the daily life of everything that goes on in the world. There's a lot of negativity out there, and it will wear you down slowly over time. And that's how you get apathy and people not caring and not wanting, because it's just too much. It's hard. It's heavy stuff. And I think it is important to have more positive messaging so we can, because you need to change the tone of the narrative a little bit. So we are more hopeful. We are more positive. Yes, not everything is doom and gloom. Hey, we are moving in this direction of powerful positive change. Things are working. Here's what's enacting. Here's what's changing. And that's fundamentally important.
It is, and that's part of the problem with the media as well, is that they, I guess they think that they drive readership by focusing on the negative. When
It's all about the
as, as
viewership, right? Whatever
yeah,
whatever
as
sells.
as much negativity there is in the world, there's a lot of positive things going on, and we don't hear about these things. And I think that people do feel hopeless and helpless if they just get negative news after negative news. You have to give them positive. You have to show what the good people in this world are doing. You have to highlight that, not
That's just good for mental
highlighting.
health.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do want to end on a positive note there, where I do think things are improving as an anthropologist, just looking at the societal trends and everything. And from a generational perspective, majority of my generation, millennials, absolutely agree with almost everything we've been talking about. And Gen Z and the younger ones, they are almost unanimously fully on board with it. Everybody, of I want to say below a certain age, largely agrees with everything we've talked about, that we need to stop doing these things. We need to treat other animals better, because, hi, we're an animal too. And we need to treat other animals better. We need to stop doing all these testing. We need to change how we approach other beings outside of ourselves. And there is a surge into that. I'm seeing huge growth in empathy. I work as outside of podcasting. I work as a substitute teacher. I am floored every day by the levels of empathy that I'm seeing in kids that are dramatically different than when I went to school. I am incredibly hopeful, and I think we are going to get there. I would like it if we got there a little bit quicker, though. But I do think we are going to get there.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And for those who do believe this, and the younger generations, if you're listening and you do care about this world and you do believe it, the only thing I'm going to ask you to do now is start practicing what you believe. If you're not practicing it already, practice what you believe.
Love that. Practice what you preach. Yes, absolutely. One last thing. Well, actually, that sounded like pretty good. I was going to ask, what's the one message or call to action you'd like to leave with our listeners? But that, I can't think of a better call to action than that. Practice what you believe. Put forth the intention that in the world you want to see. Put it forth. Step up and find ways that you can help bring the world you want to live in into reality. That's the only way we're going to get there. If we,
It is.
and
Don't let
it's going to
others
take all
shape
of
it.
us.
Don't let others shape our world. Don't let the people who are not kind shape our world. We need the people who are kind to be shaping our world.
Aysha, this has been absolutely a fantastic interview. I'm so grateful you took the time out of your busy day to come and talk with me and our listeners about all this. Is there anything at the very end of this that you would like to plug, or anywhere that listeners can find more about you and the important work that you do? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so I'll just give my website. It's the Center for Contemporary Sciences with a plural at the end.
Wonderful. Again, thank you so much. It has been an honor and a privilege to talk with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope maybe in the future we can have you on again and see what updates in the future.
Thanks so much, Alexander.
Thank you for tuning in to Pause and Reflect, a podcast made possible by ROLDA, the Romanian League in Defense of Animals. Today's conversation reminds us of the power of empathy, the importance of stewardship, and the ripple effect of individual actions towards collective change. If today's story inspired you, please share this episode and help spread the message of hope and action. Every little bit counts. I'm Alexander Taylor Clayton, reminding you to reflect on the role you play in this intricate web of life. Until next time, keep positive and carry the spirit of compassion and curiosity wherever you go.